Since 2002, 14 million disclosures have been processed by the Criminal Records Bureau. While some people say it's an important mechanism in safeguarding children and vulnerable adults, others say it's poisoning the relationship between adults and young people and is an invasion of privacy. In this programme, we're going to look at the vetting procedure and ask, is it working? And are our children safer?
I think it's a system we've needed for years because, whether we like it or not, paedophiles do appear in schools.
Well, in English law, you're supposed to be innocent until proven guilty, but the vetting system assumes the opposite.
It won't protect our children. It hasn't and doesn't protect our children.
I think children have the right to safety, and parents have the right to the confidence of knowing that people have been properly scrutinised before they've been given access to their kids.
The first step of the CRB process is one thousands of applicants will be familiar with, filling in a form confirming their identity, address and declaring any criminal convictions. But probably very little is known about the subsequent stages after the form is passed to a body like a local authority. So where does all the paperwork go? And this is where the applications end up, at the headquarters of the CRB, right here in the centre of Liverpool. So let's see what happens next. I've arrived alongside a batch of applications. To show me where they go from here is Communications Manager Mark Favager.
Well, this is our mailroom where we receive around about 70 to 90,000 application forms per week. All those application forms are x-rayed, they're then opened, and we then check all the application forms for errors. Around about 10% of our application forms are returned to the customer. Once we're accepted the application, we then scan all application forms onto our system through the scanner.
Vetting staff working with children is not a new concept. Prior to the CRB's launch, applicants were checked against List 99, a record of individuals barred from working with children in the education sector. This still happens today, so what's changed?
Criminal Records Bureau, CRB, was launched in 2002. Prior to that, if employers wanted access to information about someone's criminal past or associated information about criminality, they would have to go to individual police forces. Service was rather inconsistent, sporadic, and took any length of time. Bearing in mind what we actually produce at the end of the day here is open access, both to the individual and to the employer, about whether there's any information about someone that may be relevant to an employment decision about whether that individual should be trusted to work with children and vulnerable people. And I think that's one of the greatest issues, I believe, in society at the moment.
What we have here is our call centre. We have round about 80 staff here, and we take calls from our customers, from the general public. This can be general inquiries, application inquiries, basically anything.
What sort of numbers are we talking about?
We're talking volume-wise about 26,000 calls a week.
That's quite a lot.
It is. But the calls that we get are varied and many. They can be callers concerned about an application, could be about a general application, but we try and deal with them as best as possible. We know the concerns of our customers.
OK then, Mark, it's another room full of people. What happens in here?
What happens here is when all the application forms are scanned onto the system, it then enters our system electronically, and we carry out the confidential checks that are required as part of the disclosure service. So that can be checks of the Police National Computer, the Protection of Children Act list, the Protection of Vulnerable Adult list, and List 99.
So this is a highly secure environment, I imagine?
It is. Everybody here is security cleared to the highest level, and one of the skills that they have in here is being able to match an individual to an individual that has a criminal record. It's a highly skilled job, and they always try and make sure they get it right first time, every time.
The people in here can't just sit and tap in anybody's name, can they?
No. Anything they do here is monitored, and we make sure that the only details that are searched and accessed are those that have come in via an application form.
The types of convictions disclosed can range from minor indiscretions like motoring cautions to serious offences like assault. So how effective is the CRB?
What we do know is that over 60,000 people have been prevented from working with children and vulnerable people, specifically on the basis of the information that we've provided to employers. Now that's in addition to the deterrent effect of having the service in the first place.
You were talking about people who are barred from working. What type of people are they? Not necessarily 60,000 paedophiles, are they? They're just 60,000 people who haven't got a job after their CRB check has come back?
That's right. Well, what employers are saying to Ipsos Mori do the research for us, and what they're saying to Ipsos Mori is, based on the information that we've provided, that they've decided in 60,000 cases not to employ the people. Now, that doesn't mean to say they're paedophiles. There may just be, and of course that's not the case. What it means is there may well be information on there that leads them to have a doubt about whether that person should be trusted working with children and vulnerable people. There could be a whole variety of reasons for that. However, I would balance that by saying that we do know that even where we issue disclosure certificates with information on, over 90% of employers are actually still choosing to recruit those people.
I think what you can say is it's a major step forward, because what it means is that at least the minority of people who are convicted will not have access to children and be alone with children. In the old days, they would have waltzed into any school, any children's home. No one would have asked any questions. If there was a gap in their history, well, they would find a good explanation. Now we look at the records of people with convictions of this kind, and they cannot take up post, and that is terribly important, really important.
After all the relevant checks have been made, the CRB issues a disclosure certificate, both to the applicant and the employer. In the majority of cases, checks do come back clear, but there are issues surrounding the validity and workload of the vetting system. So what do the head teachers responsible for checking their staff think about it?
It's very important that the CRB process is robust. Let's just get that on record, and we, making sure there are safeguards there for young people in our schools. Absolutely important. By and large, I think that's working well. We were concerned about the level of CRB checking, and it is an additional administrative task, but it has to be done properly.
They play a big role in my life, actually, because constantly having to redo them for people, and people who've already got them and keep doing them, is quite an onerous task, really.
It's an inconvenience in many ways, in that if you are making appointments, it might even be of somebody who is well known to you, but until you've actually done the check, they can't start working with the children. But having said that, I think it is vitally important that it is done.
I'm absolutely happy with it for someone who's committed to working in the school quite a lot. But it's very hard, like when you have a work experience 14-year-old come in for 2 weeks, who's meant to be CRB checked, or when you've got a parent who's just doing a football run, one-off, and is meant to be CRB checked. These things are when you have to sort of think to yourself, I can still use a bit of head teacher's discretion.
If you were employing a teacher,
yes,
and their CRB check came back and it was absolutely fine, except they'd had a little theft conviction when they were 18 years old, would that affect your judgment on that person?
Trust them with the dinner money. No, it wouldn't bother me, I don't think, at all.
The CRB got off to a shaky start, with backlogs of checks preventing thousands of people taking up positions in schools. Things have improved, with checks now taking between 2 and 4 weeks. But other, more serious issues may undermine the entire vetting procedure. The Police National Computer depends on people putting information into it. And like any human-made system, it's prone to mistakes, meaning that an innocent person could be confused with a criminal. That's exactly what happened to Emma Budd, who was confused with someone with the same name while applying for a carer's job in 2005.
I had a letter back from the CRB asking if I had ever lived in a certain address in Newport, so they had conflicting information. So sent him a letter back saying no, and gave him a list of the whole address, all my address history. And then after that, I had a letter back from the CRB with saying that I had 2 convictions of shoplifting.
And how did you feel?
Really annoyed, because I was going for this job and I knew once that came through, the job would be gone.
After appealing to the CRB that the convictions were not hers, Emma was asked to attend her local police station and provide a set of fingerprints.
I had my fingerprints taken, came out and seen my grandparents' friends, which was extremely embarrassing, because they phoned my grandparents then asking questions why was I in the police station and things like that. I did really feel like a criminal, the way I was treated in the police station and stuff like that, with the fingerprints, and awful.
After successfully appealing against the mix-up, Emma went for another job 6 months later, only to have the same thing happen all over again.
I had a letter back then from the CRB with the same convictions, even though they promised me that everything would have been cleared.
The process relies on getting the identity of the applicant correct. If it isn't, the accuracy of the whole procedure is undermined, with potentially serious consequences. So how could this happen?
We sometimes find here that where we're going through the very sensitive matching exercise, which some people might think is an accurate or precise science, it is not. We often find there are people who've either used another person's identity, which could be an old school friend, it could be we've known sisters, brothers, and that is found on police records. My staff then have the job, and in certain instances make an absolutely perfect match. The details are identical. They have no knowledge that this might be somebody who's taken somebody else's identity or abused someone's identity, and therefore we make a decision to reveal that, to make the match and reveal the information.
After a second appeal, the mistakes on Emma's disclosure have been corrected, and she now has a clean police record. But cases like hers have highlighted a potential flaw in the system. If an innocent person is prevented from working through a CRB check, surely it then makes sense that a guilty person can pass a CRB check and end up working with children.
Bear in mind the example that you're quoting to me is where someone may well have used someone else's identity in when in contact with the police. They would have to go through a process with the employer to use the similar identity details and for the employer to confirm it is that person. I think that's highly unlikely. Highly unlikely.
But you couldn't rule it out?
One can never rule that out.
The amount of times that I've actually cried over this is unbelievable. It's embarrassing because the stress and everything. It's caused a lot of upset, and really, really emotionally it's been awful.
We're not insensitive to this because there are human consequences here that I'm well aware of, where somebody gets a disclosure and it says you've been convicted of it and it's not them. I'm well aware of that. It halts and sometimes completely stops someone getting a job. That is awful.
It's always going to be in the back of my mind thinking, is it going to happen again or not?
While a disclosure will highlight convictions, it may also unearth false allegations, so-called soft evidence, meaning that a teacher may not get a job in the future on the basis of a completely unfounded allegation from their past.
There are still exonerated accusations being left on CRB checks, and we claim that that's an abuse of human rights. It is quite wrong to be innocent and yet to be still stand accused and have your future, not only your future career, but your future life blighted by something which could be a malicious allegation.
Well, in English law, you're supposed to be innocent until proven guilty, but the vetting system assumes the opposite, that if someone's made an allegation about you, that's enough reason to make you a dodgy person who shouldn't be near children.